Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event to comment a little bit on the results of the Scottish and Welsh elections that happened today. I'll be joined shortly by Clear and Jamie, so they can comment on the results and we can all have a nice chat about these results of the elections, okay? Please leave your comments anywhere you want. We are live on Twitch, we are live on Facebook, we are live on YouTube. So if you're following us, please do any questions. Please really don't hesitate to comment anything or give us your thoughts. So thanks for joining us, Clear and Jamie. Hello, how are you?
Nice to have you.
Great to be here.
Okay, so before we enter to really comment the election results, I would like to ask you, what is exactly your electoral system? You know, because we may have people watching us from all over Europe that we are streaming, of course. And so many people may be hearing a lot of things like, okay, yeah, they have two lists, but they vote on their constituencies. What is a constituency, for instance? So if you can just give us like a brief explanation of exactly how's your political system, Jamie, for example.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it can sometimes be a little confusing, but I suppose anything that involves any PR and isn't just clean first past the post can be. So we have two types of MSPs in Scotland, members of the Scottish Parliament. There's 129 in total. The first batch are elected through first past the post races in their actual constituency. So I'm here in Stirling, and we've just elected Evelyn Tweed as our MSP for Stirling. And that was in a first past the post race with three other candidates. The person with the most votes wins. The second batch of MSPs are elected on regional lists. So how you get onto those lists are down to the party. So parties have internal elections and they rank members and all this, and eventually they come out with a list of 7 names. The voters, all they see on their second ballot paper is a list of the parties. So that's known as your party vote or your regional vote. The constituencies in Scotland are all grouped together into one of 8 parliamentary regions. So here in Stirling, in the middle of Scotland, we are part of the Mid Scotland and Fife parliamentary region, and that region returns 7 MSPs. So me as a voter in Stirling, I have a choice of 8 MSPs to go to with any issues that I have. And together with the constituency and the regional MSPs, 129 of those will create the new parliament. So it's really exciting actually, because there's a mechanism that's used on the list to balance depending on what happened in the constituency. So in the Mid Scotland and Fife region, there's 9 constituencies, and typically my party, the SNP, do really well. We pick up 8 out of 9 of those constituencies. We have done in the last election, and it looks like we may do so again. So that means that when it comes to the second round, it requires more votes, in essence, for us to pick up seats on the list. And therefore, it gives a bit of proportionality to things. So again, people have someone closely aligned, more closely aligned to their views that they can go to with issues if they don't support the SNP, if they support another party. So overall, it can be a bit complicated to explain on the doorstep, but people are beginning to understand it. That it's, you know, most parties ask for both votes, so both votes SNP on the constituency and the region, but it does ensure that there's some balance in the makeup of our parliament, because if it was pure first past the post, as is used in the Westminster system, because Scotland has, maybe should have explained that at the start, Scotland has its own devolved government, but it also returns members of the British Parliament as well. That is straight up first past the post, and the SNP usually just wipe the board. So it can't be very fun to be a unionist if it was just first past the post.
Okay, many thanks, Jamie, for this question. And Clear, I assume it's more or less the same, but I as well wanted to ask you, because I was really a bit shocked when I learned that you were, in fact, today having as well another kind of election, right? You are electing some kind of officer. So please, if you can explain that a little bit, please.
Yes, of course. So as Jamie explained, we too have constituencies. There's 40 constituencies in Wales. They're usually grouped around 55,000 people. So they're 40 constituencies of more or less 55,000 people each. And then where Scotland has many more regions, we have 5. North, Mid and West, South Wales, West South Wales, Central, South Wales East. And they elect 4 members of the Senedd each. So there's 60 members in total. And the remarkable difference between ourselves and Scotland is that our regional lists are very small. And that means that it's harder for parties like the Green Party, that does very well in Scotland, to break through onto the lists in Wales because our lists are smaller. Where Wales differs as well is that where Scotland had 2 types of voting system in their election yesterday, this first past the post, this winner takes all, and also the proportional element. On the regional list, where the more constituencies a party wins in a region, the less likely they are to be able to win seats on the regional list. We also had elections of police and crime commissioners. Now, these are a product of powers over policing not having been devolved to the Welsh Parliament like they are to the Scottish Parliament. If you tuned into the stream earlier in the week, I said that we have a third-rate system of devolution in Wales compared to Scotland and the north of Ireland. So our policing system is very much still dictated by Westminster. So the police and crime commissioners, which don't exist in Scotland, don't exist in the north of Ireland, they're kind of a bridge between the police force and the public. And they're elected every 4 years. Last year's elections had to be cancelled. And they're elected using the single transferable vote. So we had 3 elections yesterday on 3 different voting systems, which complicates things quite a lot. Usually my party, Plaid Cymru, does well. There's 4 policing areas in Wales. But we won't get the results for these elections until the end of the weekend, probably Sunday at the latest.
Okay. So, yeah, well, that's another thing that I wanted to speak about. You think it's good? It's that usually, your elections take quite long, in the sense that, counting all ballots, you can never really know the final results until some days have passed. And well, I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts regarding this? Jamie or Claire, whatever.
Yeah. So, I mean, usually we're similar to Lear, that we have different voting systems for different levels of government. So in the local government elections, council elections in Scotland, we use I think it's mixed member. It's a form of SCV. Then at the Scottish Parliament election, we use additional member system, and then at Westminster we use first past the post. So I feel sorry for the council workers, the employees, because they're the ones who actually count the votes and help run our elections. So this time, because of COVID, I just came back from the count. Usually what would happen is on polling day, the polls would open at 7. They would run all the way through till 10 at night to give people a chance to do it before or after work, because unfortunately elections aren't public holidays here. And then afterwards, the votes are whisked away to a central location, the count. So usually it's a town hall or some sort of large sports centre. The candidates and their team are invited in. And then, the count just happens then and there. So usually you find out the result about 3 or 4 in the morning, depending on how big your constituency is. But this year was completely different. The voting stopped at 10 o'clock last night, and then all the votes were taken to a secure location. And this morning at 9 o'clock is when the ballot boxes were opened. And we spent a day, the council workers spent a day sifting the votes, making sure the counts were verified, and then counting the constituencies. So when we move on later in this call to the results, it will seem a bit strange, because only some of the constituencies have been called today, and most of them have been called at the same time because they only had 9 to 5 to do it. And then tomorrow we'll pick up the constituencies that haven't been counted, as well as the regional lists. So we won't know the result of who will form our next government really until tomorrow. We've got a good indication based on what's happened so far. But this time the election is taking the 2-3 days, which is unusual.
Yeah, that was the thing, no? That one thing that you could see in the media. We will know the results on Saturday, no, on Sunday, on Friday. Depending on where you looked at, you notice different things. No, people were telling you different things. So people, I suppose, well, I was indeed for sure a bit unsure, if I can say it like that. When will we really know? But hopefully, yes, today we will shortly go to comment the results that we have so far. Jamie just explained, today we will only have part of the constituencies being counted, not all of them, but well, we suppose that we will have a nice idea of, or at least we will be able, I believe, to see where is everything going, no? And clearly, I assume it's exactly the same, no, that as Jamie explained in Wales.
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So usually, the polls close at 10 p.m. We're already in these counting centres, which are a central location where all the ballot papers for a particular constituency are taken to, and counting usually goes on throughout the night. I don't know what it's like where Jamie is, but when I was a candidate back in 2017, the votes were counted in a cowshed with us. So it was quite cold, even though that it was June. So you have to remember to pack all these different things, and it's the one night of the year where you can have the worst diet ever of energy drinks and everything, because you've got to look kind of awake and fresh face at 6 o'clock in the morning, because normally every single candidate does a speech. So yeah, things have been quite different this time, and that's why we're normally, by now, we'd have quite a good idea of all the results. Now we're unsure. Now we have to wait until a lot more results come in. I think in Scotland, a little over a third of constituencies have been declared. In Wales, just over half. So we're very much in the early days of counting the results, because of how different things have been. And usually what happens is, during the verification of votes, the parties have people at the table so they can do some kind of tallying to get an idea. There's been a lot less of that this time, which has made results even less apparent beforehand, because the political parties haven't been able to do a lot of the exercises that they usually do to give an idea, and journalists usually find out somehow that way of things early on. So as well as being a lack of results, there's been a lot of lack of speculation today as well as to what's going to happen. It's quite different this time, but maybe this is how we can continue to do elections. I much prefer receiving results in the middle of the day rather than at 6 a.m. in the morning. When I was a candidate, there was a recount. No, I don't hate it either. Maybe this is it makes it a lot more accessible for the council workers as well. That it's in their working hours. And I think that that's something that another thing that probably COVID has taught us is that maybe this tradition of counting overnight, even though it gives us all a sleepless night on the Thursday after the polls have closed, maybe it's a better way of conducting our elections.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, now if you let me, I would like to change the topic a little bit, to say, okay, yeah, now there's been new elections, but where are we coming from? Okay, so what were the results in your last elections? Okay, and how's been these 4 years, more or less? So what's the situation now that we've arrived to new elections? Just to change a little bit, clear, if you want to start now.
Yeah, of course. So I'm just bringing up the results in front of me here, just so I can get them right. So in Wales, the Labour Party, the centre-left pro-union party, have dominated politics in Wales for 100 years. And since Wales voted in a referendum to establish a National Assembly, as it was then, it's now a Parliament, Senedd Cymru, the Labour Party has dominated. They've won the most amount of seats in every election, but never an overall majority. Under the system, I'm sure we'll speak about this more as the evening goes along, but under this 2 different elections at one time, 2 types of seat, constituency and regional, it makes it very difficult for parties to win a majority of seats, unlike in the system for the Westminster Parliament in London. So the Labour Party has always been dominant, never ever won an overall majority of seats. So last time around, Labour won 29 seats. You need 31 seats to have a majority in Wales, so they were very close. Then Plaid Cymru came second with 12 seats. The Conservative Party came third with 11 seats. Then UKIP, the far right party, entered the parliament for the first ever time with 7 seats. And then the Liberal Democrats, who were a dominant force in a large part of rural Wales, saw their worst ever election to the Senedd, only returning 1 member, not being able to call themselves a group, and just having that 1 Liberal Democrat sat on their own. So over the last 5 years, the Assembly has had probably, the Senedd, sorry, it's been Assembly for so long before then, the Senedd has had probably this more turbulent time. The 7 far-right members didn't really achieve anything. A lot of them to political parties, a lot of them didn't make any good contributions at all. A lot of them really tried to benefit themselves from the system. They were an absolute disgrace. And so parties saw individuals defect. So Plaid Cymru suffered from this, and it allowed the Labour Party, from these defections and from the Liberal member, to have a government with a majority of 31 coming into these elections. So what Labour were very much going into these Welsh elections were, wanting those extra 2 seats to have the majority themselves, but under our situation, that's very difficult. The polls beforehand have showed very different results on who comes second, whether that's Plaid Cymru or whether that's the Conservative Party. And the polls have shown it's hit and miss, as they say, as to whether there will be any far-right members of the Welsh Parliament after these elections, and that can only be a positive because they have been a disgrace. And the final result is we may, as we have seen at Westminster level, the Liberal Democrats lose all their seats in Wales. Maybe they will lose this seat they had in the Senedd, which means that they will face the centre of Welsh politics, will face a total wipeout, which will be quite shocking, actually.
Yeah. So, lots of things to bear in mind when analyzing the results of Will. And now, Jamie, yes, you can explain us a little bit where is the SNP coming from, no, and what's its situation arriving at this election.
Sure. So, like Leah, I mean, our democracy is quite young in that sense. Is that we only got our Scottish Parliament in 1999. So, it's less than 22 years old in that sense. So, there's only ever been 4 or 5 elections. The first devolved election to take place, the centre-left Labour Party, which was in the government of the UK at the time, they won the most seats, but fell short to form a majority government. So they formed a coalition with the Liberal Democrat Party, and that repeated itself again in the 2003 election. You may have seen that. I was just looking up the results. But then in 2007, that's when things started to go really badly wrong. That's when, at the UK level, the Labour Party had the baggage of the Iraq War, scandals were beginning to rack up, and people in Scotland really wanted to change. So the end result from that election was the SNP gained 1 more seat than the Labour Party in 2007. Still not enough to form a majority government, but the result was so shocking because this has never happened before, and it never could happen before. This was only the 3rd devolved election, that it gave the SNP the moral authority to form a minority government. So they managed somehow to keep this minority government going and keeping budgets passing for 4 years. And then in 2011, something absolutely extraordinary happened. The SNP won an outright majority in a system that it's quite difficult for that to occur. Remember what I was saying about the list vote, that it takes more votes on the list to win list seats if you've done well in the constituencies. So the SNP won a majority in 2011. That gave them the mandate to seek an independence referendum. And in 2012, the Edinburgh Agreement was signed, which between the Scottish and UK governments, which authorised the referendum, and that took place in 2014. Unfortunately, the SNP-led Yes campaign failed. It's only 45% of the vote, but up from sort of low 20s, so quite good. And then 2015 was when the pendulum snapped, and the SNP took almost every single seat in the UK election for Scotland.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was insane. And I mean, these were seats that had been held by Labour for 40 years, 50 years. the swings were just astronomical, 20%, 30%. And that really was the beginning of Labour's downfall at the Westminster level. And then the 2016 Scottish Parliament election came. However, interestingly, in an interesting twist of fate, the SNP failed to retain the majority. So the SNP went into minority government with budget support from the Greens, and that's sort of the situation that we've been in at the moment. Now, many progressives actually don't mind that because they see the Greens as keeping the SNP honest, and the Greens are further to the left, so they've managed to squeeze concessions out of the SNP. But this election, what we're seeing right now, turnout is up, which usually helps progressive parties. But the SNP have retained most of the seats that they were defending and gained a few. Now, as Lear said, that we've only declared a third of the seats, but so far it looks like we could be on track to regain that majority. But it's important to note, in the British context, that majority is seen as very important. It's seen as you've now got the mandate to pursue your referendum. Whereas others in the independence campaign, they see it as, well, if you've got a parliamentary majority for yes, which exists at the moment with SNP and Greens, then that should be enough. You're over the 50% mark. That should be enough to get your referendum. So really, we'll see. We're trying to play it cool at the moment, but I think people in the SNP are quietly confident we might just get that majority back.
Good. So yeah, as well as we said about Wales, that there are several things to bear in mind when analyzing the results, and as well, both of you put on the table several topics like the paper of the far right, or the referendum. Will it happen? Will it not happen? When will it happen? In Scotland, and as well what the state of independentist movement both in Wales and Scotland. I think clear that we are to be shortly we are to be shortly joined by a member of Play Tifan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's already prepared or not yet.
He's the Play member hasn't joined yet, so we'll just keep on talking.
Okay, yeah, we got
when they do join. Yeah, no worries.
Okay,
but yeah. So if you want to speak just quickly about kind of the independence movement, and as I mentioned in our live stream on Tuesday, these are the first Welsh Parliament elections where there's always been talk of independence. Independence has always been a very prominent issue, a very prominent issue for discussion. But this is the first time, against the backdrop of increasing support for Welsh independence, as high as 35%, according to a recent poll, where independence, was a key part of the discussion of these elections. And you know that they're a key part of these elections when it's not only the pro-independence parties that are talking about it, but it's when the unionists are talking about it as well in their leaflets and their campaign literature. So it's the first time where Plaid Cymru, my political party, went into these elections promising an independence referendum in the first 5 years of a Plaid Cymru majority government. It's the first time they've gone in with a bold proposal like that, of putting independence right on the ballot paper. And the message was to the 35%, according to the recent poll, supports independence. If you want independence, you have to vote for it. And that was very much the platform going forward. And it featured in a lot of the key debates. The backdrop to this was the fact that the pandemic response in Wales, because health is devolved, was done by the Welsh Government. So it was the first time many people in Wales saw the Welsh First Minister on televisions announcing restrictions, announcing measures which greatly affected their lives in a totally unprecedented way. And there was this much larger awareness going into these elections of the Welsh Government, what they did. We have a huge media deficit in Wales, and that's been a large topic for discussion today, where a lot of Welsh people get their media from London, which doesn't cover Welsh issues at all, unless something's gone terribly badly. So it's the first time really where Welsh institutions have been on the ballot paper, have been a key part of this discussion we've had, and Welsh independence has been a key issue which has been spoken about alongside health and education and social care and those issues.
Yeah, Again, Jamie, if you want to say something related to that about the independentist movement in Scotland, no, we know that um, it's been on the table for quite a bit of time now, no, since the referendum happened, as you said before, in 2014. But how did the independentist movement arrive at this election as well?
I mean, it's a difficult one to sometimes gauge the mood of, because post 2014, yes got to the yes to leave the UK and becoming an independent country. That got 45% of the vote versus 55% to stay in the union. But that 55%, I mean, in many ways, it was a poison chalice. It was a pyrrhic victory for the Unionists, because the Labour Party, again, left wing in Scotland, very representative of the trade union movement, they entered into a campaign called Better Together with the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats, and that absolutely destroyed them. And that stands to why they lost so badly in 2015. They would have seen to have stood shoulder to shoulder with hard right neoliberal Conservatives to defend a constitutional structure that many Scots believed didn't vote for them. So in 2015, we were quite confident, okay, even though the no vote had happened, there might still be an appetite to explore this in the future. But at that time, there wasn't any serious consideration of a second referendum anytime soon. It was a settled issue in many people's heads. But 2016, the Scottish parliamentary elections, where we did lose the majority, the SNP formed the next Scottish government with a manifesto commitment. If there was a material change in circumstance, i.e., Scotland voted to stay in the EU in the upcoming EU referendum that year, and the rest of the UK voted to leave the EU, and if Scotland was dragged out of the EU against its vote, that would be grounds for another referendum. And that's exactly what came to pass. And it's doubly ironic because in 2014, a main message from the Unionist no side was, if you go independent, you will leave the European Union. So many European nationals in the UK were worried about that. Many people were worried about losing Scotland's place in Europe, and so they voted no. And then for 2 years later to be slapped in the face and dragged out anyway. So then in 2017, there was a general election for the UK. The SNP lost some seats. And so people thought, look, you've lost your majority in 2016. You've lost some seats in 17. This is a dead issue now. Independence isn't going anywhere. But then during the pandemic, something really interesting happened. Independence support started skyrocketing, and we saw a huge poll, 58%, in one opinion poll for independence. Now it's settled back down to 50-50, but it's not an issue that's gone away. And the SNP have made it front and centre of their campaign this time that if re-elected and returned to government, they'll focus on the pandemic first, recovery first. But after that, we need to think, well, what are we recovering to? What kind of country are we going to be? And we need the powers of an independent country if we want to avoid a return to 10 years of London-led austerity. So for me, it's a very live issue. I don't predict a referendum, obviously this year, doubtful about next year, but certainly the indicative timeline is within the first half of the next Parliament, which would be 2023 at the latest. But we don't know, because we don't know how long the pandemic will last.
Of course. Yeah, no, we'll return later on to this pandemic topic. Now, I think, that Fleer, that as well, Morgan from Play Tiffen is prepared to join us here. I see him. Hello, Morgan. How are you?
How's it going, comrade? Long time no see.
Hi. We are here with Fleer, whom you already know, and Jamie from the YSI. He's the YSI International Officer.
Nice to meet you.
And
Hi,
the
Jamie.
first question, before getting to analyze the results, my first question is, how are you? How you've lived yesterday and today, yesterday's voting, today's counting of the votes, and don't know, what are your initial feelings?
It's been a very interesting election. With the pandemic, things have been by necessity different. So the biggest difference for us is obviously the counting taking place the next day, and that adding additional delay to the result, but also pressure and adding on to people's nerves. I think there's a lot of nervous people around Wales, and I'm assuming in Scotland as well, but not necessarily in the SNP, because they're all confident. The downside of this is, like I said, we've had to wait for the results, and and usually by this point in the day after the election, we'd know everything. And at this point, we're only less than halfway through the main 60 seats being declared. So, there's still lots to talk about, still lots to come through, and hopefully lots more Plaid Cymru seats.
Yeah, no, I think we all can relate, not to this thing that you said about the nerves. No, that once the election has happened, you say, okay, now I want the results already. No, they have to be counted, and as you were saying, no, this of adding a +1 day, no, this can of course get at the nerves of anyone. So now if we can maybe start analyzing a little bit the results. We'll start with Wales, of course, because Morgan's here. So here is so far the results that we have. You were saying, Morgan, that so far have been counted less than half of the total seats.
I'm going to ask Claire to refresh his page because a couple more results have come in since then.
Okay, might be. So how many seats do we have already, more or less, in total?
28 seats have been declared so far.
Okay. So we'll see that Labour is taking the lead, followed by the Conservatives. Played. If people here can see, below the number of total seats, there's the change. So far, how these seats are compared to the ones that they previously had. So we see that Labour, as I was saying, is taking the lead with 17, losing 1 seat by now, as Morgan just said. So far, only 28 seats have been declared. So there are a lot more to come to that. Conservatives are second with 7 seats, winning 1. And Plaid is third, having 4 seats. And that's basically it. And so far, no one else has any more seats. Maybe if we can move to the map, because it's a bit
we'll go down to the map.
Right? So we can.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about not refreshing the page. I thought I did that automatically. So, Morgan, if you want to talk us through some seats, obviously the colours are quite simple. It's blue for the Conservative Party, they're the centre-right Unionists. It's red for the Labour Party, they're the centre-left Unionists, and green for Plaid Cymru, which are green. So, Morgan, do you want to take us through maybe some of where Plaid Cymru have won so far? And then we can delve into some more of the other results.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to some breaking news if I can, unfortunately. The Labour Party and the Rhondda are seemingly so confident that MP Chris Bryant has posted a video thanking Leanne Wood for her term as the member of the Senedd. It's not been declared officially yet, but knowing what we've heard on the grapevine, and that if they're that confident, then it doesn't seem like that's going to be a good result for us. Unfortunately, not gonna lie, very disappointed. Very.
You're right there. It's been very. Yeah, it's very difficult. I assume going into these elections, what normally happens in Wales is that we go door to door, speaking with voters, and this is something that's done. It's very much something that's done across these islands, and because of the pandemic, we've not been able to do that. So, in knowing where we are and knowing where we stand in a lot of places, it's become increasingly difficult to do that, I think. And what we're seeing is, and these results are kind of being replicated across these islands, is wherever there's the incumbent are doing remarkably well. So in England, where there's municipal and local mayor elections and a by-election for the Westminster Parliament is happening, the Conservative Party has done remarkably well. And now in Wales, what we've seen is the Labour Party, who've been in power, who are on TV announcing the coronavirus restrictions for the last year, have seen a remarkable increase in their vote share. And that has affected seats where we previously held with the Labour Party second. And the Rhondda is one of those seats. And it's incredibly sad that if the official declaration repeats what Chris Bryant has said, the MP for that constituency, that Leanne Wood has lost a seat, because she was an amazing campaigner, and the reason why myself and why I'm sure many are involved in politics and involved in Plaid Cymru. And what we can see is across the south of Wales, where the Labour Party do very well, that they've kept a hold onto those seats and they've increased their majorities. And this is very much a pandemic bounce for them that they've lost in England. And from the Conservative side, they wanted to win a lot of seats from the Labour Party in South East Wales and in North East Wales. In North East Wales, they did very well in the last Westminster elections in Wales, but they've not been able to replicate that. Do you want to talk us more a little bit through that, Morgan, as well?
Yeah, well, I was about to say the thing we're seeing here across all of the UK is whoever's in power in that part of the UK is the ones that are seen to be responsible for the pandemic and the response to the pandemic. So that's translating into positive press for them. Additionally, then you've seen the benefit of having almost daily broadcasts to the population for their respective areas. It's had a lot of positive impact for those parties. Labour in Wales have seen the benefit of that, and they've just declared Newport West is a hold for Labour. So there's more and more seats coming in all the time. And Labour have inevitably done very well. What I will say is, though, this won't necessarily be bad for us in the long run when all of the regional seats are declared as well. Plaid will still come out doing quite well in this, and come the end of the day, we could still be kingmakers. So let's see how this goes. There's still plenty to play for, and there's still plenty of opportunity to get our positive manifesto pledges completed in government, and who knows, we shall see where we end up when all the results are in.
Okay, now if I can just ask one thing to Morgan or to Claire, and one of the two wells that we have here. One thing that strikes when looking at this map is that we see that the three are there constituencies that Plaid has got seat there are aligned, are in the coast. Would you say this is a typical thing that you were expecting already, that because this is a quite independentist area of Wales?
So historically and traditionally, Plaid support, its heartlands come from areas where the Welsh language is strong as well. So that's why you see the main constituencies that we've got there, because they are primarily the Welsh language speaking areas of Wales. But as we saw in the last election, with Leanne Wood being victorious in the Rhondda, that isn't an area that's stereotypically a Welsh language sort of centre, and that's where I'm from. I'm not a Welsh language speaker, and there's plenty of people like me that are seeing Plaid, and I do believe as the South Wales votes come through, we'll still see a strong support for Plaid. The areas that we have been called already that we've not won, we still came strong in lots of those places. There was lots of second place victories, so that's still very good for us. We have still seen an increase in vote share or overall turnout. I was reading earlier on in Caerphilly that Della Fuel didn't win there, but she did have the highest vote count since the start of the Senedd. So, that in itself, I've just got to confirm the numbers, but if that's true, that's huge. That's a great result for her, and it reflects on her as a person and as a candidate directly, because, she's, by the look of it, she's going to be my favourite person in the Parliament soon.
And of course, us coming second in some of these seats means that there's regional list votes. This will help us in the regional lists. So assuming that people follow this both votes message that Jamie spoke about earlier in the Scottish context, that exists as well in the Welsh context. And we even saw, I think in your constituency, Morgan, a Labour candidate not saying in their election literature to vote for other parties, but maybe suggesting that a list vote for another party would be the best strategy at keeping the Conservatives out. Do you have anything to say about that, say about strategy when it comes to that?
Yeah, got to be careful how I word this inevitably, but I think particularly the left-wing blocs across the Senedd were very conscious that if we didn't vote tactically in different areas, that there could have been an increased number of Conservative or abolish seats. And I think Jane Bryant, who you're talking about there, she took the initiative, shall we say, to carefully word a letter to residents. And in that, she said effectively, we are going to win Newport West. We're doing everything we can. We're throwing the kitchen sink at it. And we're confident we're going to win. So with that in mind, we'd like you to be conscious of who you're going to give your second preference vote to, because if we win this, we won't win regional seats. And I think that was quite, dare I say, mature politics from a party that in other parts of Wales have, from reports, played quite dirty. So I do have to give a quiet round of applause there. Strategy wise, though, I think there's been a real concerted effort, even if it's not necessarily overt or conscious. It's something that has been done across Wales to try and minimise the results of the Conservatives and particularly the Abolish the Welsh Assembly Party. So I'm very happy that we're seeing very low numbers there. It puts to bed the argument that there's more people that want to abolish than want independence, because Labour doing quite well here, fine, but we know from other recent polls that Labour members on the whole support independence as well. So the message here is independence wins.
Yeah.
And as we move forward, just to finish this point, and we see the greater divide between what's happening in England, where it is now clear that England is a conservative state, and Scotland is moving ever closer towards independence when the time is right after we've dealt with the pandemic. Then we'll see that it's time for a decision, and I hope I can see that this becoming ever clearer that there's a very different political divide between Wales and England.
Indeed, yeah. As well, you've been talking a bit about England. I don't know if everyone is aware of that, but today as well there were local elections. Correct me if wrong. Local elections in England. No, and as well there were some by-elections in Hartlepool. I believe it's something like that, right?
Yeah.
And as well as we were able to see, and I will explain why I'm talking about this now. Well, as Morgan just said, the Conservatives basically won, and this is related to a question that someone made us on the private chat. Well, sorry, on the different platforms that we are streaming. And the question that I send both to the Welsh people here and to the Scottish people here is: do you feel that the Conservative gains in England and continued support for the SNP and Plaid in Scotland and Wales show that the UK is ideologically splitting apart? Don't know.
I can jump straight in and say absolutely yes. I think it's reinforcing this, isn't it? The just want to point out, Mabel and Cano got an extra councillor. They're up to 5 up the Canoics. Yeah, realistically, I think it's obvious here that as England goes more and more towards being a conservative state, the SNP in Scotland doing very well there really highlights that the three nations on the island itself, the mainland, they're fundamentally different, and even within England itself, you're seeing growing support for Northern independence movements, Yorkshire Independence Party, movements that, I don't know, even a year ago you would have had a bit of a giggle when you talked about that. People that I know who live in the north of England who aren't politically active in any major sense, but are fed up, are looking at these movements as credible alternatives, particularly to the Labour Party at the moment in England. They see the Labour Party under Keir Starmer, and they don't recognise a movement that defends them or stands up for them, but they see the Northern independence movement particularly as a credible alternative. So I would have liked to have seen more move towards that direction, but I don't think there was enough emphasis for them on local government. So maybe you will see more of them as you come around to the next Parliament election. But between you, me, and everyone else here who's had to fight elections for the last 5 or 6 years almost non-stop, I'd like a break, if I'm honest. This election is the first election where I've not done as much groundwork campaigning purely because we haven't been able to, and then sort of conflicts in schedules and stuff. Done whatever you can online, but even that there's a lot of organisation. Thea, I know you did lots of planning and groundwork for some really great campaign ideas. So again, thank you from the movement.
And Jamie, do you have any thoughts about this question?
I'm just jotting down some notes. Yeah, I mean, I think that the UK is an interesting beast. It's a very weird country. It's an historical quirk, really. It's an historical quirk. I spoke about this in the last call about how England and Scotland, merged to form Great Britain, and through conquer and very unsavoury things. Ireland was brought into the mix, and Wales as well. So I think what devolution has shone a light on is the differences in these nations. I mean, this isn't one country; it's a union of countries. And from the external point of view, that's sometimes lost. So maybe some viewers, perhaps not these viewers, but international viewers sometimes lose that the UK isn't a single unitary state. And for me, it's like devolution has just exposed what was already there. Scottish people, Welsh people, Northern Irish people, even the large space of England, were not happy with the centralised system that the UK has, of hoarding power in London and Westminster, we have 5-year dictatorships in this country, really, using the first past the post. And there was never really a democratic means to express that discontent before devolution. I mean, Scotland would return for 40 years, like 50 Labour MPs who couldn't do anything because they weren't in government. The same with Wales as well. And the same with North of England. So I think what we're seeing is the UK tearing apart at the seams because it doesn't make any logical sense anymore. The issues that regions are facing and nations are facing, they're not compatible with the centralising dogma that Boris Johnson's put on steroids. I mean, we shouldn't forget that all these constructs that we're electing members to, the Scottish Parliament, the Welsh Parliament, the Senate, they could be abolished, overnight if Westminster wanted to. We have no written codified constitution in the UK. The Parliament has unlimited sovereignty, and power devolved is power retained. So what kind of basis is that to build a country, or a multinational country, in the ways that we perhaps see Belgium managed to put together, integrating different languages and cultures into one coherent whole? The UK just isn't that, and we have a large force in UK politics that would rather see these assemblies, parliaments abolished and power completely, ingrained in Westminster. That's just not healthy. It isn't, and it's the reason that almost half of Scots want out, and it's the reason that the Welsh independence polls are spiking as well. So, for me, the UK is fundamentally broken, and actually, to put on record, it's a real shame because I used to be a unionist. I strongly believe that we achieve more working together, but it's a union of equals. And the more research I did, and the more I got involved in the campaign for independence, it's just clear it doesn't work. This relationship's broken. So get us into the EU with all its flaws. That's a union to me with a future. This UK's had 300 years to work out its kinks, and it can't.
I'm sort of going to echo that completely. I wouldn't go as far as saying I used to be a unionist, but I definitely used to be a federalist.
That's
but realizing that there was no chance of reforming this broken system that we've got, and again, okay with the union as long as it's a union of equals. I feel more European than British than I've ever felt British. There was a point and I've completely gone off it and I've lost what I was going to say. Don't worry about it. I'll come back to it when I remember.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I've got it. Sorry. The
then
important thing that we need to remember is that we're not alone when we think about, people outside of the UK don't understand how we're set up. They just see the UK as one entity, and they don't understand that it's made up of Cornwall, the north of England, London, Scotland, Wales. There's lots of different cultures at play here, and communities involved in trying to make this effectively either work or not. But we've got to remember that other parts of the world, particularly other parts of Europe, are in exactly the same boat as us. Never think of, if you name a country in Europe, there's almost a guaranteed certainty that you can break it down into constituencies or into its broken parts. It wasn't until I spent time in Barcelona and the Catalan countries that it really hit home for me that actually even Spain isn't Spain. Spain is made up of its constituency parts, same as the UK is made up of its constituency parts, and France. Yeah, all of the countries, particularly in Europe, that you can name, can be broken down. And that's the reality that we've got to remember, is the people in those countries, they think we don't understand them as well. And that's why IFE in particular, getting people together from the smaller nations of Europe and getting to understand that actually we've got a lot in common and we can work together, is quite powerful. And for me, it's one of the biggest things I want to encourage young people, particularly in Wales, but across Europe, that if their parties they support are involved in IFE, they should get more involved so they can understand that they're not alone. They've got friends, not just in their party, not just in their country, but across the continent.
Indeed. Many thanks. Okay, so now if it's good for you, I think we could jump now to analyze a little bit the Scottish results
Yeah, sure.
that we have so far.
I'll just because there's 2 elections at one time, it's not as seamless as what we did for the Catalan elections. But I will bring them up now. So it's very much same page to what we had for the. I remember to refresh this time. So Jamie, do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you wanted to go to the map, and if we go to, you'll see what looks like a dog's head on the map in the middle. You see that orange head? Yeah, that's Fife. That's where I'm from originally. Across the water from that, you see the red dot. Just above the red dot, you have to zoom in. It's Edinburgh Central. So where that red dot is, right in the middle of the map, right up next to it, you see it? There's a little sliver of yellow between the red and the orange, Edinburgh Central. So that's a really interesting constituency, right in the heart of Scotland's capital. Huge different mix of demographics, poor, rich, European citizen, born and bred Scot, all these different groups mixed in. And what's interesting is that in 2016, the Conservative leader Ruth Davidson won that seat. So she won that constituency. Many things were happening in 2016, but this was before the Brexit vote. So this is the first time that constituency has really had a chance to express its view on many constitutional factors, Brexit and independence. But Ruth Davidson was very pro-Remain, so pro-stay in the EU. But then afterwards, after Brexit, was going to happen, she supported it. She supported Prime Minister Boris Johnson, even though she personally didn't like him. So the fact that that's turned SNP is very interesting, and interesting about the mood of the country's in. So I wouldn't read that so much as a change towards pro-independence sentiment, but more revenge for Brexit. That would just be my take on it. But something that I didn't touch on last time, but it would be silly not to mention it. For everyone viewing, we underwent an interesting period in Scottish politics from 2018 to 2021. Our former party leader, there were complaints and allegations made against him, and it went to a court trial, and then there was a whole government process about how our government dealt with those issues, and that accumulated. That all ended in March this year, when 2 independent reports came out about our First Minister. One found that she hadn't done anything wrong, and the second, which was led by a party political committee, found that she hadn't intentionally done anything wrong, but there may be something that had happened. So in everyone's eyes, the second report, commissioned by the independent lawyer, was a case closed. Okay, we can move on, and that's why we haven't seen this as an issue in this election. The reason for this preamble is that former leader decided to launch a new party. Alba, or Alba, is the English word. Alba is Gaelic for Scotland. And the theory behind this party, as I've said before, was that they could pick up a lot of list seats if people voted SNP 1 for the constituency, and then Alba 2. And so this was touted. This was launched 6 weeks ago. It was touted as the next biggest thing. We're going to have a super majority for independence. With this method, we could have 90 plus MSPs pro-independent out of a parliament of 129, and nothing. the highest they've polled is I think 2% so far in the Highlands and Islands region, and even lower everywhere else. So whilst the list vote does need to be counted tomorrow, these results are indicative of what we've seen at the counts today. And I think that's really interesting to talk about a little bit, because for so long the SNP and the Greens have been the pro-independence parties in the Scottish Parliament. And so this election was a bit of a test of that SNP unity. How many SNP voters would stay loyal and both votes SNP, or perhaps give their second vote to the Greens? And there was a real fear in the Yes movement of how this might turn out, because you could have the second biggest party in the Parliament and the two leaders really don't get on. But it hasn't come to pass, and the SNP look like they're going to do really well. So I just think that's quite good news, and it's also quite interesting about where the independence movement is. It still sees the SNP as the vehicle to achieve a referendum.
How much of Alba not getting list seats is a reflection on the party leader rather than the idea of a supermajority? Because I can imagine a supermajority for independence would be quite appealing to the majority of yes voters, but that organisation and their leader can be as much of an attraction as a distraction sometimes.
I think you're absolutely right that recent polling put that particular party leader very, very negative. I think Boris Johnson was more liked in Scotland, and that's saying something. That's like
in Scotland.
In Scotland. Yeah. But I think that the notion of playing with the list. This is the first election that we've sort of seen that, of people thinking that votes are wasted and so we should redeploy them somewhere else. This is the first election that's really came into play. Now, what's interesting is that in 2011, the SNP won so many votes on the constituency and so many votes on the list. They picked up enough list seats. They got so many votes in 2011, it was unbelievable. They picked up enough list seats to win a majority. And in 2016, there was I think 2.3% drop in the list vote, and that cost them the seats to lose the majority. So the simplest message for us in the SNP was both votes SNP, don't chance it, because if you're playing with your list vote to move it to a different party, you're assuming that we're going to do really well in the constituencies where we might not. And if we lost in that constituency, we would be helped again on the list. So I would also say that there is a majority built in already for independence, because in 2016 the Greens won enough seats. There is an independence majority in the Scottish Parliament. It's just this weird British notion of majorities mean everything, that in 2011 we got that majority and in 2016 we didn't. So it was seen as, well, you can't have your independence referendum.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Your parliament's similar to us in as much as it's designed not to have a majority, right? It's designed to force parties to talk and communicate and try and come up with a compromise or a consensus rather than one party steamrolling what they want.
Yeah, I think proportionality is baked into the system. I wouldn't say so far as it was dreamed up in a kind of dark room that will deny the SNP a majority forever, but certainly it was based on European ideals where coalitions and confidence and supply arrangements are the norm. And this was quite a break from Westminster tradition, because I think in the history of the Westminster Parliament, there's been a handful of situations where there had to be a coalition type government. And in 2010, we saw a Conservative Liberal Democrat coalition, and the Lib Dems got absolutely stomped on. They did really badly out of that coalition. And in 2015, they paid the electoral price. So in British politics, there's quite an aversion to coalitions. They're seen as weak. They're seen as, compromise is a dirty word. I don't mind them because that's the European norm. But really, the people we're having to convince to get this referendum is, the British electorate of, we need to try and convince somehow the UK government to agree to this referendum. We think we've got an airtight moral argument if there's a pro-independence majority, more so if there's a SNP majority. But it's whether the rest of the UK electorate think that. Recent polling suggests 51% of people think in England, if the SNP got a majority, they should have a second referendum. So that lends credence to that argument. But, the ball's in the UK's court.
I think you'll find across the whole of the UK that you'll have more people that are in favour of letting Scotland have the choice than, regardless of how big the majority is, as long as you have a majority, that you should be allowed to have the choice. Whether or not we would, as individuals, want to see Scotland go or not is up for them to decide as individuals. And I think it'll be a healthy mix, particularly in England. There'll be lots of people that say, actually, you know what, Scotland, if you want to go and looking around us, this isn't great. Yeah, off you go, and they'll support you. So there won't be any bad blood. I think the problem will be you'll have individuals in the English political system that are going to try and stop you having that discussion to begin with, as we've seen in Catalonia. You know, the barrier to you leaving isn't your percentage of how many people will vote for it. It's they're going to stop you having the vote.
It shows you how morally bankrupt the argument is, though, because all of this, and we saw this in the Conservative election campaign here in Scotland, devoid of policy. I mean, in fact, the policies didn't add up. They were wanting to add, I think it was 600 million to the NHS, but then also 600 million to social care, and essentially they spent the same money twice. Devoid of policy, but it was all no to referendum, all focusing on this technical process. Oh, well, we're going to move the goalposts. It has to be an SNP majority. When that looks likely, no. Now we're going to think about, 2 questions, Devo Max, federalism, just everything to move the goalposts, and it's all focused on process. And I said last time, it's just immensely disappointing because there is someplace a positive case to make for countries working together in some fashion, because, as you said before, loads of places do this, but there's just a lack of imagination from unionists about how to actually achieve that, and zero appetite for federalism. That's the answer to every problem in Scotland from the unionist parties, well, Lib Dems and Labour, will go for federalism. And you think, well, you don't have to convince the Scottish electorate, you've got to convince the English electorate, and they have no appetite for it. So, yeah, it seems to me there's only one path forward, and that will be, once we get the referendum, we're going to leave. we're going to be off again.
Federalism gets brought up every now and again by the usual suspects in Wales, and lots of people see it as too little too late. If you had offered Wales federalism 15 years ago, I think there could have been a chance for it, because there was more of an understanding that Wales was wanting more, but until at that point independence wasn't as popular as it is now. And I use the word quite cautiously. I do dare say independence is becoming popular. People, particularly younger people, are waking up to the idea. They're looking at Scotland and the amount of young people in Scotland that are getting involved in politics, and now they're being enfranchised to vote as well. They're seeing that they have a voice to have their say, and for them, they think, well, if I vote here for a party that won't ever be in charge in Westminster, what's the point? They're not stupid. These young kids, they know the thing, and I'm proud to be the co-chair of a movement that's trying to get as many of them involved as possible. So,
indeed. Well, we don't have now the results page of Scotland, but as we saw, the SNP is doing quite good. Here they are again. Maybe clearly we can go up to the numbers themselves, so we can comment them as well a little bit. Of course, the map is very visual, and you can really get this. I don't know if he's hearing me. Clear?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. Yeah.
Sorry, we can move a little bit up. Yeah, no worries.
Of course we can.
Yeah.
So do you want to go to the list?
Yeah, to the list, no?
Sorry.
So we can actually see so far what's going on, what we're seeing. So we see that Scottish National Party here is taking the lead. If I read this well, with 3 more seats so far, are the ones they got, or this change? What
these are ones they've gained. So these are ones they've gained. There's 129 seats in the Parliament, and 65 are needed for a majority. I think the SNP, off the top of my head, I think they were short 4 last time. So, I mean, all eyes really are on winning these seats and also defending the ones that we have. So in 2016, yes. So in 2011, they'd won 69 seats, the SNP. And then in 2016 they had 63, so very too short of majority. So that's how on a knife edge this really is of winning this moral victory. But it's doable. It really is doable. The better we do in the constituency, the harder the lists become. But we're taking places that we've never taken before in the constituencies. The 73
that in Central.
The 73 constituencies and seats and 56 seats on the regional lists. So it is possible, unlikely, but it's possible to build an outright majority just from constituency seats. So let's see what happens.
And yeah, following the list now that we see here, we see that at a very great distance follow the Liberal Democrats with 4 seats, Conservatives with 3, and Labour so far with just 1 seat. Remember, everyone watching this, that we are not yet even arrived at how they count both seats, and that this will probably finish and hopefully finish tomorrow. So, but so far, these are the results. They are definitely looking good for the SNP in Scotland. And well, then we see as well Alba, no, here at the end of the screen right now. No, that's the party that you were mentioning. But I see as well several other parties, no, that might be related as well for independence. Don't know if you want to comment on any other parties here that are minority parties. Most of them, to be honest, I didn't even hear of them so far.
because the Scottish Parliament has no minimum threshold to win a seat, as like in Germany. So a lot of pop-up parties came up this time. Some of dubious origin. So some funded, God knows how, spamming Facebook feeds. But the Scottish Family Party comes to mind. They're, I believe, a Christian right-wing party. So very traditional family values. Not so hot on LGBT rights. I don't think that they're going to win any seats. UKIP, that's quite a funny one actually, because after the 2016 Brexit referendum, was it that UKIP changed to the Brexit Party? Yes, after the 2016 Brexit referendum, UKIP collapsed. Nigel moved over and started Brexit Party, and then they contested, I think, the 2019 EU elections. Yeah, or something like that. But they're ridiculous. Reform UK is the sort of spiritual successor to the Brexit Party. I'm pretty sure in the others category, it won't show, there's an Abolish Holyrood party as well, which I think is run by the same people as the Abolish the Synod one as well. This is the Welsh Parliament. Right wingers again, dubious cash.
And hopefully they'll get as few votes as the Abolish the Welsh Assembly party are getting, so don't worry about it.
Of course.
We're good.
The Abolish the Holyrood party's main tagline was, it costs £100 million a year to run devolution. Think of how much money we could save. And I'm thinking, how much does it cost to run the Westminster Parliament? I mean, let's abolish that instead. Save tons and tons of money.
That could be the idea, yeah. Yeah, and this is as well a topic that I wanted to raise, both in Scotland and in Wales. That's the paper of in this election that's playing the far right, right? Who is representing the far right parties, if there are any? And I guess I know, as you both explained, both when I mean both, of course, I'm in Scotland and Wales, and know that far right wasn't that strong before. Are they supposed to be strong now? Are they not? They are supposed to stop existing, as we all want, in Parliament. But so yeah, what is your insight in that, Jamie?
Do you want to go to Lear first? Because I've spoken loads.
Lear or Morgan.
First of all, I need to thank. Oh, sorry, Morgan. Carry on.
Okay, I'll just say my piece on the far right, and then I'll go. I think the biggest mistake we make as left-wing movements, and it's not just here, but everywhere, is sometimes like we give them too much credit, and we think about them too much. And I'm a big believer that you don't platform them, you don't engage in any way that can give them any sense of credibility, and you shout, you exclude them from it because once they're in, you won't get rid of them. However, as we've seen with Abolish the Welsh Assembly, the noise that they've made and the platforms that they've been given and the social media attention that they've been given hasn't actually done them any good at all. They've got next to no votes across the whole of Wales. And actually, if they have a single member of the Senedd tomorrow, I'll be surprised. I don't see at all this being a problem for us, really. In the UK, I think every time right-wing parties have come forward, particularly in England, I think there's been a bit of remember the Second World War, and these guys are the bad guys, and it's, even though the iconography they use and the symbolism they use, it tries to play on that British bulldog spirit. they can be seen through. And I think we're quite lucky that they don't get anywhere, unlike in other parts of Europe.
Yeah.
And I don't want to feel quite I don't want to be dismissive of it at all. I just think it's important that sometimes we don't need to focus on them, and we should focus on the positive message that we've got to talk about rather than giving them the time of day. Because all that happens is on the rare occasion you give them the platform, is that they have that opportunity to talk to people and maybe they'll convince some people. But on that note, I've got to dip out. So thank you very much for the time, guys.
Nice to hear from you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Morgan.
So yeah, and now we are introducing Ion. No, I think as well from Play Funk.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll bring Johan in.
Johan, sorry.
Not without Johan, right?
Sorry, and the Welsh. Hi, Johan. How are you? Hi, how are you? Good?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Okay. So how are you feeling?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, perfectly. We can hear you. So the first question.
I don't think you.
Well, sounds like there's a delay, Johan.
In some ways, I'm happy. In some ways,
good.
There's a bit of a.
Yeah, I think he's having trouble with his connection.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I've just taken him out. When he starts again.
Okay, yeah. Sorry about that.
Just to pick up on the far right point, just whilst we're on the topic.
Sure.
I say that Morgan's analysis is good, but I think the truth is a bit more disturbing, that the Conservative Party just eats any far right movement. I mean, we saw what happened with the Brexit referendum in the first instance. That came about because Cameron was worried of UKIP's support. So they adapted and they swallowed that position and held a Brexit referendum. Likewise, the post-Brexit environment was quite ugly and xenophobic. The Conservative Party absorbed that and made it their own platform. So I think the reason we haven't seen outright far-right parties be successful is not only because the first-past-the-post system doesn't lend itself well to that, it's because the bloody mainstream right-wing party absorbs them and ends up mainstreaming the policies.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for your contribution as well, Jamie. I don't know if now we have Johan ready to enter, or if
we'll
not,
try and bring Johan back in. Johan, can you hear us now? We're still having trouble. I'll just bring in. Sorry, hurry up.
While we are waiting to see if this can be resolved, some people in the comments is asking us to comment as well, not only on the seats that the parties are getting, but as well of how many people actually voted, not the percentage of vote. I don't know if this is as well present in this website. If we can, we saw the turnout here. No, I think.
I'll just see.
I think the turnout's just underneath the. If you keep
the turnout here we see. It's what do you make it, Jamie, of this turnout? Is it big? Is it low for Scottish standards? Okay.
I mean, for me, I'm a bit spoiled because 2014 saw like an 80% turnout for the independence referendum, and that was like a record high. I would say that you can see below it says change plus 7.5, so clearly up. In Stirling, in my constituency, the turnout was up as well. So people, I think the lockdown and the pandemic has shown people the power of politics. And so people who say, well, politics isn't for me or it doesn't affect me, it's affected everyone. We've been stuck in the house or, having to wear masks or go for vaccinations. So it's re-engaged civic society in a way that it hasn't been for many years.
Indeed. I don't know if we can actually see here clear the percentage of vote for each party, or if not, we can as well comment then the turnout in Wales, how it's been the turnout in Wales.
I will just bring that up now. From the website I'm looking on, it doesn't see that we can get an overall number so far as to how many people have voted for each party. I assume that's because I will just share the Welsh election results. It looks like we have Johan back in. It looks like his connection is working a little bit better. So
Okay, just in
once I
time then.
bring up this, just in time, exactly.
Right.
So the Welsh turnout is 45%. Now, as I mentioned before, there's very much a democratic deficit in Wales when it comes to our own media. In Scotland, there's an established print media and there's an established TV media. BBC Scotland are a lot better, a lot stronger in Scotland than BBC Wales are in Wales. And also there's usually Scottish editions of the daily national, as they call them, newspapers, where we don't have that in Wales. So pre-pandemic, it was always very difficult to get the message across that we have this parliament in Wales that controls so much of, affects so much of what you do, where your children go to school, your healthcare services. And over the years, the turnout has been going up and up as people become more conscious. Now, we hope when the final figures come out, that we'll see over 50% having voted in a Welsh election. So the majority of people having voted in the Welsh election, which unfortunately we've not seen before. Now, over 50% would give Senedd Cymru, the Welsh Parliament, more legitimacy, but it's difficult when we are faced with an apathetic UK media in Wales, and I'll include BBC Wales in that, because their coverage of the election has been poor. And many people have said this from many different parties. Even the Conservatives were mentioning that today. And they're not one to usually criticise their friends in the media. And so for them to say it as well, there really needs to be a change when it comes to how Welsh elections and Welsh issues are reported on. The Welsh Government faces a lot less scrutiny because there's less of a media scrutiny on them by these national outlets. So we really need to fix this democratic deficit. And I think that's when we'll see a higher turnout in Welsh Senedd elections and more scrutiny on the Welsh Government.
Okay. Well, thanks. I don't know if now we are able to let Johan join us. Yes, I think so. Hello, Johan. Hi, do you hear us?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, all good now. Perfect.
Can you
Okay.
hear me? I don't think so.
Yes, we do.
Okie doke, great.
Perfect.
Oh.
So, well, first question, Johan, is quite the same. I've been making everyone.
I can't remember the question you asked me now.
Yeah, that was where I was getting at. Well, first question then is, how are you feeling? What are your initial thoughts on the results that we're seeing today?
Well, it's obviously been a bit of a mixed bag here in Wales. So there's things to be happy about, and there's things which I'm quite disappointed with. Well, I'll start here in Swansea, my hometown. I think Plaid Cymru has done well. I've been the campaign manager in my constituency of Swansea. I'm pleased to see my Rhian Ambara has increased the vote share, and John Davis and the neighbouring constituency and Di Lloyd have both done quite well as well. And I also ran for election myself in a council by-election, which went fairly well. I didn't win, but I wasn't really expecting to. So I'm happy about what's happened here in Swansea, and in other parts of the country, I think it's fairly safe to say we've had quite pleasant surprises. In Preseli, Pembrokeshire, we've done well. In Wrexham, we did about twice as better as I expected us to. But then there's other things which have been honestly quite devastating on a personal level, especially Leanne Wood being unseated in the Rhondda. I think she's the best advocate Wales has ever had, and I hope she continues to work with Plaid Cymru. I'd quite like to see her job in the policy department. I think she has so many good ideas. So that's definitely my biggest disappointment. So there's only a handful of constituencies left to declare, and I think Plaid Cymru might be able to fork back some of our losses with regional members.
Good to hear that. And well, I personally quite interested, no, that you said that you were the campaign manager, no, for your region. Well, sorry, for your constituency, if I understood well, for Swansea. So how did you lead this campaign? No, as
Yeah.
far as I know, that was a quite strong campaign. No, and as you said, you had good results then out of it. So basically that. Oh yeah, here I see the shot.
Well, I think one of the things which we see in Swansea as a weakness in our local branch of Plaid Cymru is that there's not really that many permanent figures. People tend to come and go, and all of the big figures in Swansea Plaid have changed over the last few years. But I think that might have actually benefited us because it meant we had fresh ideas. I had a really young campaign team here in Swansea. Well, I'm only 21, so I feel sort of baptism by fire being asked to be the campaign manager. And it was, well, there was only really 2 full-time campaigners. So I'm very glad that we managed to increase our vote share by, 600 votes with only 2 campaigners.
That's very good news indeed. And now this as well relates to something I wanted to ask. In fact, both you, Johan, and you, Jamie. That's how this pandemic affected, the campaign. Has it changed very much the campaign because of the health crisis that we are all living? This health pandemic, this COVID-19 pandemic, and how have you adapted to this new situation?
Yeah, I mean, it really the SNP. Typically, the SNP's hovered around about 30,000 members before the 2014 referendum, and after that, it shot up to about 125,000 members. So, for context, that's a 5-fold increase. But also, we're a country of 5 million people. So, in those odds, you'll know someone who's an SNP member, and even more people who are SNP voters. Our biggest strength is our people power. So in a campaign, we would have street stalls, we would have door knocking, leafleting, targeted videos, ads on Facebook, social events, raffles, dinners, dances. All of this was sort of paused and frozen. And so for the first few months of the campaign, all we could do was online or the occasional letter drop, which is quite expensive actually. So we got literature through people's door through the postal service. And we took out campaign ads and we had a strong social media presence. But then in the last month, as things eased up, we could get teams back out, still very limited, but we did get people back out in the streets, putting leaflets through doors, doing knock-up, trying to identify our support. But for a lot of this campaign, we were flying blind because usually we have a very sophisticated system of identifying previous support, shoring it up, getting new support, deploying activists to key areas and polling districts, and we just couldn't because we didn't have the data coming in. But in Stirling, we still won. I think it slightly increased our vote share from last time as well. So it shows what we were able to do was effective. And actually, it was only us that I ever saw out. I met one Labour activist the whole time, and I think the Tories, the Conservatives, were out a handful of times as well. But we had teams out every single day for the last 4 or 5 weeks. So we've got numbers on our side. It was just frustrating not being able to use them.
And what about you, Johan? What can you explain us from the campaign, your campaign experience in Wales, in Swansea?
Yeah, well, I suppose it's very similar to in Scotland. I think the pandemic really gave the incumbents it gave a boost to the incumbents. It's the same with the Conservatives in England, Labour in Wales, the SNP in Scotland. Whoever's in government ends up more popular because of their handling of the pandemic. So I found myself on people's doors and them saying, "I think Mark Drakeford did a good job," and I would have to agree with them because he has done a good job. So it's not been easy to convince people. But basically, Cymru doesn't have as many resources as the SNP. I think that's probably quite obvious. So we do rely on door knocking quite a lot. And usually we'd start 6-7 months in advance back in the autumn. But in reality, this year we had less than a month of actual door knocking. So I think we've done very well out of a sticky situation, I think.
Yeah, that's for sure. No, and as you were explaining, no, in your own region, no, in Swansea, that you were campaign manager with, remember, everyone 25 years old, as he just said. And that's a very good thing as well, to always see young people as us, if I can say so. I'm little bit older, but not that much, hopefully. So yeah, and definitely campaigning always gives good results. No, as you both were explaining. No, we are seeing very good results from the S&P. We are seeing as well some more or less results from play. No, as Johan as well was now saying, some very good results in some areas, then some things that do not go that well, as the situation with Leanne Woods. But well, overall, I think that we are going to see good results today, in both in Scotland and in Wales, and that definitely my thoughts about that. So yeah, people here are congratulating both of you. Well, all three of you here. I don't forget yours, of course, as my co-host here today as well. And speaking about Wales, so yeah, I don't know. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about, or any personal experiences maybe that you had during this campaign? Any anecdotes? Any things that said, oh, well, that was curious, well, that was interesting? For example, Jamie, you mentioned that you met once a labor activist as well. Don't know any other experiences that you all three had. If you want to explain them, I'm sure you as campaign manager, you surely have quite a few of them, of anecdotes, of experiences of staying late nights and more nights, staying late, trying to coordinate everything.
I think my legs say it all. I walked 18 kilometers and then 22 the next day. So that's my anecdote. Sore legs.
What about you, Ewan?
Envy. Well, I don't think it's exciting previous elections that I've helped to campaign with, because usually the fun part of campaigning is going out and meeting people. And I used to campaign in Llanelli for the 2019 general election. We'd all go out and we'd get coffee, and then we'd do half a village all in one go, and it just felt so social. So I think obviously in 2021 things social isn't how I describe most things. So I've still met new friends through campaigning. I've met some other Plaid Bank people. I wouldn't be part of the Plaid Bank committee if it wasn't for this campaign, and if it wasn't for the coronavirus pandemic, I wouldn't have gotten involved in this campaign because I'd be living in Belgium.
Well, that's interesting then. So, Johan, many thanks for you joining us tonight to talk about the results and to analyze and to share your thoughts and your ideas. Many thanks. Congratulations for the part that corresponds to you, for these good results in Swansea. And that's all. Many thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to add to what Johan was saying, just quickly, in places, Plaid's constituency results from what's been announced today, as we've seen from what Morgan has said quickly and what Johan has said, we've had some very encouraging results from some areas where the local campaign has worked so hard in the last couple of weeks, with candidates who have put in work for years and years locally. And I'm not saying that all candidates haven't done that, but in areas where we've been less strong in the past, we've really seen some quite encouraging results. We're balancing that against some very disappointing results in the Rhondda. Leanne Wood is the reason why myself, why Morgan, I'm sure many others in Plaid Ifanc are involved in politics, and to see her out of our national parliament is heartbreaking. And I just want to pay tribute to Leanne quickly and just say, diolch yn fawr I ti am bopeth nes ti. Thank you so much for all of your work in encouraging young people, as you did as your time in the Senedd. And I really, really hope that we see you at the fore of Welsh politics still, because Wales needs you, Liam. Mae Gymru angen di.
And I'm sure we all share this message that you just said, Clear. And so, well, for closing up a little bit, the last question, I feel it's quite obliged. It's what's next, no? Both in Wales and in Scotland. After these results, what's the next steps to do as a party and as a country, as far as you can say. So, Jamie, if you want to start.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, our leader, our First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has always said that the pandemic recovery needs to come first. So, it would be an irresponsible thing to do to pursue an independence referendum in the teeth of a pandemic. We need to be focusing on saving lives and recovering the economy. But it is vital and it's important to think what we're recovering to, what kind of future and nation we're looking to build. So then the SNP, I think last week, published a document, 100 days. So their plan for the first 100 days of office to help recover industries and different sectors affected. What we'll probably see, again, it depends if it's this SNP majority or if it's a pro-independence majority. We could see a Section 30 order. So to explain to viewers, that's the legal request to the UK government, let's have a legal referendum. We could see that imminently, or it could be put off depending on when. Because remember, asking for the referendum, there's a time lag between the request, it getting authorised, the getting set up and agreed, then the campaign, and then the actual election. So previously it was 3 years it took. So if it was requested now, you'd be looking at 2024 potentially. So I don't quite know, but I do think that from what I've seen so far in the seats that have been won, there is a shift towards the SNP. There is also a shift towards tactical voting amongst unionists. So Tories backing Labour, Labour backing Tories, Liberal Democrats just crying, trying to back up their preferred candidate in the local area to fend off the SNP. So that's a bit concerning because if you see this coalescence of unionist support, which is currently split across 3 parties, on the independent side, it's very much the SNP, and the Greens pick up the environmental side, more so, I would say, than the pro-independence stuff. So it'll be interesting. The next few weeks, we'll see what's going to happen over the next few years.
Okay. Well, that's interesting for sure. And Claire, what about you? What do you have to say?
Well, I think our results are a lot more of a mixed bag, really. As Johan says, we've not really, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've not really been able to get the months or even years of groundwork that goes into Welsh Senedd elections before. So a lot of what happens in Wales will depend on these regional lists, where it's terrible news that Plaid Cymru has lost the constituency of the Rhondda, but that loss means that we could be compensated for that by having, we currently have 1 regional list seat in South Wales Central. Perhaps if we are strong in certain constituencies, we could gain a second there. So we'll be compensated for our loss of seats. So the regional list makes everything all to play for in Wales. The Labour Party has done incredibly strongly today, far better than the polls were predicting that they would do. The Conservatives have done poorly. The seats which they won in the Westminster general election in 2019, unlike in Scotland, our constituencies are the same for the Senedd as they are for Westminster for now. So they've gained narrowly one of these seats. They've failed to make inroads in others. And key issues such as the building of a motorway relief road, which they put at the heart of their campaign in one area, failed to connect through to winning seats. So things are a lot less certain in Wales as to what will happen, and that really depends on the regional list votes. And that also depends on whether, as Morgan spoke about, whether the far right parties, whether the Abolish the Welsh Assembly, who have come out recently wanting to abolish the Welsh language. I don't know how you do that when there's an increasing number of speakers every single year. But, these people must find some popular bandwagon to jump on, which they think works. And it's where people were worried beforehand and where we need to blame the Welsh media for giving this party, who were not present at the last elections, the platform that they've had. They failed to turn that into constituency votes today. And if that's replicated in the regions, they will fail to enter our parliament. And the loss of the far right from our parliament will make me incredibly proud in Wales. So we'll see. If Labour falls short of an overall majority, we don't know what will happen. The strength of their result now suggests that they may be edging close to this golden number of 31. If not, Plaid Cymru very much will be kingmakers, whether to work with the Labour Party, whether to not work with the Labour Party if they fall short of the overall majority. So it's all to play for in Wales. It's very difficult now, despite some upsets, despite some surprising results. It's difficult now to see where we go from here. And that all depends on the regional list votes, which will come out tomorrow, hopefully. So I'm hoping that where there's been good groundwork, we may be able to make gains even on the regional list seats based on the difference between the results, where we're up 6%, 9%, places like that. So, it's all to play for, maybe.
Yes. Regarding one of the things that you said last, clear, but when are the regional votes, when are they being counted, no? And when will we know the results? Yeah, this question that someone was asking.
Yeah.
No, so that when will we definitely know all the results, constituency, regional lists? Tomorrow,
By
maybe?
Tomorrow evening.
Hopefully tomorrow evening. And then
Hopefully
peace and
tomorrow
quiet
evening.
Sunday. So yeah, hopefully tomorrow evening.
Okay. Well, then let's hope that tomorrow evening we have everything, because as viewers, if you've been watching us since we started nearly, as Morgan said, no, the longer the results get to be known, the more nerves that people like here we are talking today with get, the more nervous they get. So that would be a wrap for today. So thanks all of you for watching us, for watching this, I found very interesting conversation and analysis of the Scottish and Welsh election results. And of course, thanks Claire, thanks Jamie, and thanks Morgan and Johan for joining us and helping us to make a little sense of all that happened yesterday and today, and tomorrow will still happen, all the counts, and to see where are Scotland and Wales, where are they going to now with the results. Many thanks, everyone. Thanks.